أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ولعنة الله الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. Khalil Bhai, our president, thank you so much for your such kind words, and I'm truly humbled. Thank you. And thank you all for being so patient and so kind with your participation, and also the ability to overlook the shortcomings in this humble creature of God who sits before you. I just want to recap, and of course I thank all those people whose lives I've made a misery in the last 14 days, and they know who they are. May Allah bless them all and bless us all. Ameen. So you agree I made life hell for them, right? Okay, fine. So we'll just recap and pick on some of the salient points that we were trying to address. We stated that, and just make a little point in that as well, that the whole process of life is one of growth, growing from weakness into strength, from potential into actuality. And this cannot be denied, for that is the nature of existence. Now, this nature of existence is so important that religion is based on this nature of existence. Religion is directly the relationship of man and God, where God serves as the utmost point of human progression to completion and the intimate dynamism and force within humanity to propel it towards that utmost completion that it aspires to. And this, in the Islamic framework, we can see it in the form of theory, the goal, and the method and mechanism that is there to bring about this goal in line with the theory, which is the objective. The theory part of it is consisted in God and religious teachings that are directly in line with human beings becoming in sync with the rest of existence in every way possible, so that there is multifaceted completion within the human individual: existential, psychological, spiritual, moral. The end goal was that the human individual and human community becomes spiritually moral. In other words, becomes God-like. Being God-like means knowing no limits, breaking every intellectual barrier, having no limits at the level of our humanity, shedding our limitations, our lack, becoming fully moral human individual. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. The hasana of dunya is this beautiful technological progression. The hasana of the akhirah is to arrive at that state of spiritual morality, individually and as a community. That is the end goal for the human being, to complete themselves in every way possible. And then we had ahkam as the tools that allows us to complete ourselves. These ahkam are there to liberate us in line with existence. Because when we take birth, we are extremely restricted, aren't we? The whole process is for us to remove these restrictions, whether physical, psychological, intellectual, or spiritual. The ahkam were designed to do this. Otherwise, the ahkam do not work. We describe this in terms of form and essence. The essence are the first two parts that we described. The lofty objective, which is known as theology. The self-realization of a morally, spiritually moral person, which is known as the morality of Islam. And the form are the ahkam. We also stated that within the ahkam itself, there is a notion of form and essence. That the essence of ahkam is to bring about human completion at the level of physical existence and moral existence and spiritual existence. The form, however, is something which is very worldly. Nothing in the world of God is outside the sphere of change. Everything in the world of God is subjected to change. The ahkam's forms are no different. They are subjected to change always. So within the ahkam there is essence, which is to drive, to propel us towards completion. And there is a form that accommodates that essence. However, since the form is addressing the material existence of a human individual and society, it is as subject to change as the human physical being. And therefore the form can and does change. The only thing that is not compromised is the essence within the ahkam. The form is always changing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points us to that within His Quran, that pray on horseback, pray on whilst walking, so on and so forth. But pray nonetheless. Prayer, that spiritual connection, is the essence, allowing for self-realization. The form will change when a state of compromise arrives. The form gives way, not the essence. Then we describe that this does not leave any area of ahkam, whether it's the contract, capital punishment, family law, or devotion. Nothing within the ahkam is spared change and evolution within itself. We describe further things, and I just want to recap on them as we go in there and then talk about back to basics and intuition as we resolve three things that are left unresolved or need more explanation. Then we elaborated further in terms of form and essence that the human community exists in a horizontal, upon the horizontal axis in a very relativistic way. Yes? You plant two seeds, they will both grow at different rates. So the vertical trend is there of self-realization and growth, but they are growing at different rates. That is the relativity within the horizontal trend. You find that within the ahkam. If we are in normal circumstances, one type of ahkam apply. If we are outside those circumstances, the forms of the ahkam change. Similarly, if we go to the jungles of the Amazon and there is the problem of crime and theft there, due to the lack of sophistication of a community that might be there, the only recourse they might have for social protection, for protection of the society, is to cut off hands. Yes? Whereas in this part of the world, we have alternatives yielding the same essence. So therefore, the form will change. Similarly, if we go to some remote villages of Pakistan, and I've seen this and I have no bias, where we see women being treated like children and they are childlike, then of course you will need two women to bear testimony because they are not accustomed to retaining knowledge and to delivering it. But in this part of the world, where women are as accomplished intellectually as man, they have the ability to accurately retain knowledge and to present it. That scenario would change. So that is the horizontal relativity, and I don't want to go into it too much. We spoke about particular cultures and universal cultures as well at the horizontal level, which have to be intertwined. That is just a recap. Now, intuition and common sense and back to basics. What did we mean? We stated that if something is not common sense or commonsensical, then of course, if the Prophet were to come with that message to a community, they would immediately reject it. They would not find any appeal. They would say, it does not make sense to us. Yes? So everything that is inside Islam has to make sense at that very apparent level of common sense before we go into further discussions, because that is the means by which people are appealed to religion. When the Prophet said, when you transact, do not cheat people, it made sense to them immediately. Had the Prophet said that the rich can cheat the poor, it would not have made sense to them, and hence the whole driving force of religion, the whole appeal aspect would have been lost. The Meccans were not sophisticated people. They weren't philosophers and intellectuals. Whatever of the religion of Prophet that appealed to them at the level of their common sense. Now, if there is something within religion that does not make sense at face value, and it is something that we cannot explain away, or it is something from which we hide away, or it is something that is frowned upon, then that has to be looked into critically. Why? Because it may be possible that it was a response to a historical challenge, in which case the challenge has gone, but the response has remained as a part of religion, whereas it should not be there at all. Yes? And we stated that a lot of religion that we have today seems to be a compilation of historical responses. The challenges are no longer there, and they are being performed in the name of religion, but they are not religion at all. The whole growth process requires minimalistic laws and principles, and the rest of it is human experience, the process of trial and error. In the evolutionary trend, they will assess, reassess, critique themselves, and tweak their systems or replace them with the changing of paradigms. But those minimum bare laws that are there to promote growth will remain. The human experience is the charm of human existence. So now, where do we place intuition, and what do we mean rational foundations, and back to basic? Just recapping still on these points. You see, when we say it has to be based on reason, there is a reason why we say it has to be based on reason, and I see so many reasons being used here. Rational foundation. What it means is that reasonable people will say, this makes sense, for it is productive, it is not harming anybody, it is a just and a universal principle. That is the only time people will say this is rationally based, that it produces immediately, it makes sense, it is based on justice. That's what we mean as rational. But rationality is based on something else. I said that was intuition, because rationality is a later product of the human inquiry. That is when we observe the world and the baggage of experience, the whole wealth of experience that we have, that will dictate our reason into thinking the way we think, the practical reason. But what is reason rooted in? And this is my view, humble view, that reason is rooted within intuition. What is intuition? Intuition is the way in which we exist. What do we mean the way in which we exist? It is the existential property. And what is that? Perpetual, incessant growth. And that determines every state, a state of liberation at every point, and a state of self-realization. Intuition tells us that whatever is productive is right, fundamentally. And reason is a later appreciation of this intuition in a variety of manifestations. In the social context, in the individual context, upon the horizontal, relativistic axis, in personal cultures, in universal cultures, so on and so forth. So what does back to basic mean? Back to basic means that religion should not have practices that stagnate its followers or cause them regression. It can only have principles that allow for the salient property of existence, which is state of liberation, continuous liberation, and continuous self-realization. That, in a nutshell, was our subject. And in that, we critiqued a few things. Now, before we go on to shed further light on three areas that I felt have not been discussed properly, just one or two things as a prelude. Mahdi Salamullah alayh is a noble existential human principle. Yes? If you look at Judaism, they have Messianism in there. Christianity has it, Islam has it, Hinduism has it, Buddhism has it, and even the atheistic Marxist philosophy has a I forget how to formulate it, but an eschatology based on the Messiah, the end product of human surge towards completion. Mahdiism, therefore, is required existentially. What does it mean? That existence in itself dictates that there will come a time where humanity comes to a state of maturity and reaches its state of self-realization. That is Mahdi. For this, there is a great divine individual as the father of humanity, who will come at the head as the crowning glory of the human completion. Mahdiism is the outlook within Shia Islam and Imami to promote that growth. And that growth in itself dictates a state of self-realization intellectually and morally, individually, within the Muslim community and within the human community. Whether the human community is consisted of the Abrahamic faiths or beyond the Abrahamic faiths. It's an all-embracing human glorious reality that is Mahdiism. So going back to basic is actually reaffirmation of Mahdiism. It's actually putting the human community back on track. I made this point last year in Seattle, that what good is it for the Mahdi to come right now? Until and unless we are mature enough to understand the meaning of social justice, fair play, sacredness of life, lack of coercion, he will come, kill millions and millions of, in fact, it would stand at 4 billion right now, wouldn't it, if he came now? He would be killing 4 billion, right? And who can even believe in a Mahdi that will come and kill 4 billion when his grandfather came to give life? Isn't it amazing? His grandfather dipped his hand inside the pit of hell, took these people out and made them into angels. And he will come and kill 4 billion people. Doesn't make sense, right? In any case, if Mahdi were to come now and bring about justice and then go away, the next day we will start fighting again. So what was the point of him coming in the first place? He can't come until and unless we arrive at that level of maturity where we can manage ourselves. And that is the only time he can come, otherwise he can't come. Yes? All these signs that we see and the signs that are predicted are secondary to human beings maturing as a human community. Otherwise, he can't come. So back to basics means putting our community back on track towards Mahdiism. That the sooner we are back on track, the sooner he will come. We have to do our bit as well. We have to contribute to the maturity of the world and bring the world of age, bring the world to come to that beautiful state of completion, or put it on that track. Now, a philosopher had said, never turn away from entertaining a difference of opinion. Why? There are only three possibilities, he said. First, if the other opinion is incorrect, it will confirm to you that whatever you believe is accurate. Two, if the conflicting opinion is true, then it is your heritage to have the truth. It's your right to have the truth, because truth belongs to you. And you can change yourself and be on the truth. Three, if the conflicting opinion has an aspect of truth, and you have an aspect of truth, then there is a process of synthesis. Both come together to yield a greater truth. Conflicting opinions are good. We should never be frightened of it. The whole of this issue of don't read this book and don't read that book and don't read this is like treating a community like little babies and children. You know, we tell little children, don't read this and don't read that, because they're unable to understand, because their simple minds might be misled. Are men of 40 and 50 and men of 30 little babies? We should welcome differences of opinion. Should not get offended. It's good that somebody came to prove to me that I am right and they're wrong anyway. If somebody comes with a conflicting opinion, I should have this attitude that, well, after listening to you, I know I'm right by listening to the other side. Now in these series of discussions, we pointed at three things that we need to discuss a little bit further. One was the issue of intercession. The other was the issue of intermediaries. And the third one was the issue of taqleed. I'll start with intermediaries. Bringing intermediaries between us and God. Because the Imami camp is known for its whole issue and understanding of tawassul. Not only the Imami, other Muslims do the same. Now here, it is absolutely right and accurate. Nothing wrong with it. Provided it falls upon the vertical axis. It retains the essence. Yes? You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, نَحْنُ أَقْرَبْ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. We are closer to him than the jugular veins. Allah says, كَلَّا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And when the spirit reaches the throat and you begin to see the hereafter, we are closer to it than you are, but you do not have the insight. Allah says once again in the Quran, Allah yahil بين القرب بين المرء وقلبه. Allah comes between a man and his heart. And heart is designated as the core of identity. When I say I am, the core of my identity is designated as my heart. And Allah is saying, I come before you and your own I. So nothing is closer than Allah to us. Yes? So the whole end game was that we reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have full confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our parents were an introduction of God. Friend was an introduction of God. Siblings were an introduction of God. Community was an introduction of God. Through all of this, we were meant to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today, I don't need to pray to Allah as a third person by doing all these amals in which I don't know if they're accepted or not. I can merely say, oh Allah, He is here. Who is closer to me than my Allah? Oh Lord, I come to you, I open my heart to you, and even before I open my heart to you, you know what is in my heart. Today, I'm devastated, I need you, and where are you? Oh Lord, who has sustained the whole of this universe, You know my need. I don't have to tell you. It is just a courtesy. Or to say to Allah, oh Lord, you're my master, I'm your slave. You're more than a parent to me. You're the dearest friend that I have. Who do I have other than you? If I don't share with you, who do I share with? This is how proximate God has to be with us. We have to arrive at this level. What a shame if I were to be at this age and my God is not the truest friend that I have. I can't hide from my God. I love my God. Even if He were to punish me, I love Him dearly. Even if He were to punish me, I'll say, oh Lord, I burn myself. You're not burning me. I burn myself. Nothing to do with you. You're too pure. You're too loving to do any of this. Oh my Lord, you can never hate me. If you were to hate me, then burn me in the deepest pit of hell. But don't hate me. You are the one I love. This is the connection we have with our God. However, as human beings, we have different aspects to our existence. And all these aspects are godly aspects. Yes? So we say to Allah, oh Lord, aren't you the one who has created the 7 heavens and the 7 earths? Aren't you the one who looks after every creature? Aren't you the one who is mindful of every affair? Aren't you the one who has been the most caring of all? O Lord, for the sake of this care of yours, I beseech you. This, in essence, is tawassul. Seeking means to God and intermediary to God. Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi says in Dua Kumail, I set you as my intermediary to you. Look at the phenomenal thing Ali ibn Abi Talib says. I set you as my intermediary to yourself. Yeah? Then you say to Allah at other times, O Lord, for the sake of your forgiveness of my sins, overlooking my flaws, pardoning me, covering me, sheltering me in my state of ignorance and arrogance, O Lord, through that clemency of yours, I beseech you. This is another form of tawassul. All of these are tawassul with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in essence. But then you also say to Allah, O Lord, the creator of Muhammad, the creator of Ibrahim, the creator of Musa, the creator of Isa, the creator of Ali, the creator of Hassan, the creator of Al-Hussein, O the one who has created such splendid lights in your name, I beseech you through them. That is another tawassul. If somebody were to come to me, they would say, Arif, for the sake of your mother, do this favor for me. My heart will melt. I will not be able to refuse because I know what my mother is to me, how dear she is. If God has invested me with this nature, then God has that nature by priority. If you were to say to Allah, oh Allah, for the sake of your Hussein, God's godliness will pour. The great majesty will melt away into tenderness. This is tawassul in essence, because he loves his Hussein so dearly. Yes? Oh Lord, I beseech you for the sake of the Kaaba that you've created, Safa and Marwa. Kaaba is nothing compared to a believer going around the Kaaba, as the sixth Imam says. You can imagine the rank of Hussein ibn Ali with Allah. Yes? You can imagine how grand this man is. You can imagine the rank of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or we shed a tear and we say, oh Lord, I make this tear an intercession between me and you. This tear for Hussein. I often say this, that if a person were to cry on my mother more than me, I would feel obliged for that person. If anybody cries for Hussein ibn Ali, God himself feels obliged. Honestly, he does. As I said before, I will not explain my own belief of what I believe in Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, because people will think I'm a mushrik. But then to turn to Rasulullah and to say, Ya Rasulullah, be my intermediary, that is perfectly fine. The Quran says, when they commit a crime, why do they not seek forgiveness from me? And why does not the messenger seek forgiveness? And if the messenger were to seek forgiveness, Allah will be most forgiving and pardoning. Doesn't God say that in the Quran? That is the wasila. Yes? We go and say, oh Ali, I know you're alive. You are not dead. لا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. We know they're not dead. I'm not saying any of these things. All I wanted to do was to put things into perspective. By doing wasila, don't forget the essence. Don't forget the essence. God addresses us in a variety of ways. There comes a time with me and my God where there is nobody else. Nobody. There is no angel, there is nobody, as the Prophet of God said. He said, there comes a time when there is no proximate angel between me and my God. This is us. Me and my God at times has nobody else in the middle. Finish. At times it's beautiful creation. At times it's the Prophet and the family of the Prophet. At times I go to the grave of the Prophet and say, Ya Rasulullah, pray for me. Didn't Salman go to the grave of the Prophet and say, Ya Muhammad, istasqi la ummatik. O Muhammad, seek water, rain for your ummah. They're dying of drought. Of course it's all allowed. But the essence is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the individual. And everything else is a charm around this relationship. So that is tawassul. Yes? Now we come to shafa'a, intercession. How does that work? You see, it's not like somebody giving a reference letter like we do in this world. The world of God and human is a different world. Allah says this again and again and again. There is no good in you turning your heads to the east or to the west. Remember, Allah says this in Baqarah, لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تَوَلُّوا وُجُوهُكُمْ شَطْرَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. There's no good in these forms, Allah says. The essence is your heart with God. Allah says, when you slaughter that animal, its meat doesn't come to Allah. What goes to Allah is the beauty inside your hearts. So referral letter means nothing to God. In fact, I can read all the Quran and memorize it in my head, become the greatest philosopher. If it is not in there, it means nothing. As the late Imam Khomeini used to say, that you can be the best of philosophers in this world of yours. But inside the grave, when the angel comes and asks, Qul man rabbuk, say, who is your Lord? If the heart has not been involved with God, the tongue will stutter. It is the affair of the heart with God. So what does shafa'a mean? Shafa'a means to join two things together, to strengthen the first by the second. Yes? That's what shafa'a means. Until and unless the heart has receptivity naturally towards the one that they want to join with, there is no shafa'a. And that is why I made that statement. That I can say Muhammad, Ali, Quran 1,000 times in a day doesn't mean anything until Muhammad and Ali take birth here. Until and unless the Quran takes birth here, the outer Quran can never intercede for me. For it has nothing to join on to pair with. Until Rasulullah does not take birth here, until Amirul Mu'mineen does not take birth here through me, through my own existence, that Rasul, that Ali is an alien reality. So shafa'a in essence means what? That receptivity to the beauty of the truth. In that beautiful form of the Prophet and the first Imam and Quran. When that is there, that is when this beauty can compensate for the lack through the leave of God. Allah says this. He says, who will do shafa'ah save by the leave of God? So He gives leave, yes? And when that consent is given, shafa'ah can exist. But the nature of the shafa'ah is not what we are understanding. Shafa'ah is like giving water to a young plant that is dying, which revives it. But the young plant must have sufficient life inside it to be nourished by that water. Yes? Shafa'ah means a receptive heart. When that beautiful love is joined to it, the heart is revived and becomes complete. And the lack is removed. That is shafa'ah in essence. So it exists as well. We pointed at one more thing, and this is something, inshallah, if Allah wills and gives life, I want to complete at some other place. The way we are understanding the Prophet and the Imams, we made this point very clear, that Allah does not want us to exceed any boundaries. The Prophet is told, say to your community, I don't know the unseen, even though Allah says that He imparts His unseen to His chosen prophets, yes, and messengers. But the Prophet is being told, say, I do not know the unseen. There is a level of courtesy. Yes? When Imam Hassan said to Imam Ali, do not go for prayers if you know you're going to be killed, Imam Ali read the verse of Surah Luqman, وَمَا تَدْرِ نَفْسٌ فِي أَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ. No soul knows in which land it will be killed. It will die. He said, I don't know if I'm going to be killed in Kufa. That's a level of courtesy. Never, ever attribute anything that Allah does not allow. And with that, we questioned a lot of our du'as and a lot of our practices. Remember? When we made that distinction between public practice, private practice, and we said a lot of them, even in private practice, are not allowed because they don't make sense and they are not following these principles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is setting within His Quran. Finally, we came to the discussion of taqleed. I'm not concerned with the history of taqleed. It doesn't make any difference to me. In principle, we stated, it's a rational principle and an existential principle based on a state of incompetency, wanting to yield, competency, weakness, wanting to change hand with strength, existential potentiality, wanting to actualize itself. It's based squarely on that rational principle, which is based on the salient property of existence. Taqleed means making referral to the one who knows. In that we stated, all of these conditions that we have, that it has to be a man, has to be living, so on and so forth, none of them are principles at all. There is only one principle. The one who does not know refers to the one who does know. That's about it. And there's only one requirement, that the one who knows is the one who knows in the best way. Yes? That's existentially, that's all that is required. And we can't justify anything to the Quran or through the Sunnah. Now that's based in the Quran, that is formulated as taklif, responsibility. And responsibility comes upon us in terms of our existential capacity. It can't be otherwise. A girl back in the day got married when she arrived at a level of existence where she could bear children. Yes? That was the way it was. That society wasn't sophisticated enough to separate physical maturity from mental maturity. Then we acquired greater sophistication. So now, in the present day, a girl does not mature at the age of 9. So the physical maturity is delayed. In fact, the 6th Imam said that the girl will mature at the age of 13 now, because the lifestyle had changed. The cultures had changed. And their physiology had changed. So the Imam moved the goalpost back. Today, the girl does not mature at the age of 9. She matures by and large at a later age. And even when she has become physically mature, she's not mentally mature. So existentially, we can see gradation in taklif. Taklif means being vested with responsibility, which requires adequate discharge of those responsibilities in order to allow the growth process, in essence. So what is taqleed in this? that in the process of growth, when things are required of us to allow for adequate growth, and we are not competent enough to understand those things, that becomes the basis of reference to another. So the whole issue of reference to another is based on incompetency. But the evolutionary track suggests what? That every time we need to arrive at a level of competency. Yes? Every time we need to arrive at a level of new competency. And as we arrive at a level of new competency, windows of new incompetencies open up. So we will always need to make references no matter what the situation. If that is understood, then taqleed merely means what? Adequate discharge of responsibility in the process of self-realization. That is the principle. Yeah? It's an existential principle. And nothing else is required. Alamiya is one thing that, yes, is required, but not in a... Now, whether the person whose view is being referred to is one man, a group of people who are alive or who are dead, doesn't make a difference whatsoever. This is in principle. The way that it has existed has been very noble. These grand ulama, may Allah bless them, give them the loftiest rank in paradise, have carried the community through. This era now calls for different models because the community has become very, very sophisticated. It's growing at a very rapid rate. So now, the claim that is made that the amalul ami bila taqlid wala ijtihad batil, that the action of the laity without taqlid or ijtihad is null and void, this is questionable. This particular statement is questionable. Why? When can you say an act of devotion is invalid? When it is not productive, yes? When it doesn't yield the desired effects. What are the desired effects of devotion anyway? You see, the argument that is made is brilliant. That if you were to perform salah, then you cannot legitimately make the intention qurbatan ilallah without knowing that God desires this salah from you. Because saying qurbatan ilallah means I am sure that Allah wants this from me. And somebody can ask you, well, how do you know Allah wants this from you? If you can't respond, then you say, well, that statement, qurbatan ilallah, is baseless. And if that's baseless, then how do you know this prayer is being accepted? Because it requires the intention of qurbatan ilallah. Can you see the argument? What I'm saying is that this is within the very pedantic framework of what is the meaning of imitation. But if you were to look at it in an existential framework, we will see that the efficacy of a method is determined by the product and the outcome. The Quran says, if your salah wards you from things which are reprehensible and unchaste, then that salah has been accepted, as Ali ibn Abi Talib's hadith goes. So if a person were to pray salah, yes, and they become better people, then immediately it's been accepted. Can you see that? It doesn't matter whether you make an intention of taqleed or not. Who doesn't know how to pray salah anyway, that it's 4 rakat? We learn it from our mothers, don't we? We learn it from madrasas. We learn it. The real challenge is, as we stated, that the human beings can only grow through bearing responsibility, learning from experience, failing and trying once again. This is an evolutionary process. There is an evolutionary flux. We will be wrong and we will learn from mistakes. But the burden of responsibility should be placed back on the shoulders of the human beings. They need to make decisions. The levels of incompetency vary. I'm an individual, there's one type of incompetency. In my domestic capacity, there's another type of incompetency. In my communal capacity, there's another level of incompetency. In my state capacity, there's another. And in my human global capacity, there's another. There's a variety of levels of incompetency. And all of these incompetencies need to change hand with competency. And further levels of incompetency need to be discovered. That is an ongoing process. So the model that ought to be there is one that empowers, based on that minimum requirement of Islam, empowers the individual, the household, the community, the society, the state to formulate and reformulate. Just like the evolving social, economical, political systems. They are always evolving. They are always being checked. They are always being analyzed, then synthesized, so on and so forth. That is the natural process. Now, the model that I suggested was that in this day of high sophistication and sophisticated needs, we can't have a person who understands the black and white of law from a particular perspective adequately responding to these challenges. So, for example, we have a question on the table of commerce, the modern day commerce, future bonds or whatever we have. There is no precedent within the Muslim history. The Prophet came in a given context and he modified that context of buying and selling, yes? And the method of buying and selling's accuracy was assured by principles of justice and transfer of ownership, yes? But this does not have any example previously. This requires the minds of today. The businessman, the man of commerce, the bankers to say, well, look, this is the transaction, these are its ramifications, is there fair play, does anybody get cheated, what are the ill effects of it upon the society, are there any or aren't there any, and they then, their expert input, together with the input of other experts, an integrated approach, together with somebody who is an expert at the legal texts of Islam, their approach as a consensus will lead to guidelines. How would these guidelines work? I gave that model that you have an absolute limit, that this is absolutely wrong if it's exploitive or crippling the society or doing away with the rights of others, and below it are areas of discretion where you will have to make your minds up yourselves. Yes? Or in euthanasia. Let's say there will be medics, philosophers, people from care profession, and mujtahid with their texts, a host of intellects being integrated, who will then give guidelines into medical ethics of euthanasia, who will say this is the absolute reprehensible limit. Below that is a discretionary area. If your mother is old, then you can decide with her that if her heart fails, whether you want to resuscitate it or not. It's your discretion. Or if there is a multiple failure of organs, then by all means you can remove the life support system if the person is not young enough to sustain life or does not have a fighting chance. This is your discretion. But this limit here, don't approach it. That's the model I was suggesting. Or in music, this is the most reprehensible. Through psychological studies, let us say, through our own understanding that these sentiments conveyed in certain songs are inconsistent with moral and spiritual values, or inconsistent with the ethos of a moral community. This is reprehensible. Or through psychological studies that such music really damages the mind and promotes certain things within the youths or people that are not desirable. So you say, well, this limit is absolutely reprehensible. Below that, it's your discretion. You can choose. But that suggests two things. That there is an integrated approach of minds of the world. Because nobody can replace the Prophet of Islam. Nobody can replace Ali ibn Abi Talib. Nobody can replace the 12th Imam. In the absence of these people who had a very holistic understanding of life, the human intellect has an integrated approach and a process that works well. It will be fallible. It won't be infallible. And giving people the area of discretion. This is then taqleed in a newer capacity, together with bearing responsibility and evolving and learning through experience. This is what I was trying to convey on the other night. So back to basics means that we come back upon the trend of growth. I'll just finish with this example that I cited a few days ago, and only in part, and you know the whole example, but just to refresh your memory. The sixth Imam said to Abu Hanifa, he said, I hear you've become a very big jurist. He said, yes, I have. And he said, well, people follow you. He said, yes. Well, in that case, I want to ask you a few things. He said, well, if I can answer. He said, yes. How do you eat? He said, well, I eat like the Prophet ate, with 2 fingers and a thumb. Take a small morsel, put it in my mouth, chew it to the extent that it becomes watery and liquid, and then I consume it. The Imam said, in that case, you don't know how to eat. He said, anyway, how do you sleep? He said, like the Prophet. I go to bed, place my right cheek upon the palm of my right hand, and read these surahs, and I sleep. The Imam said, that means you don't know how to sleep. He said, how do you talk? He said, well, I sit with my legs folded. I don't talk until I'm asked to speak. And then when I do speak, I speak very softly. And I speak a few words only, like the Prophet used to do. He said, then that means, Abu Hanifa, you don't know how to speak either. He said, I'm baffled. I'm describing the Prophet's attitude in speaking, eating, and sleeping. He said, Abu Hanifa, before you eat with your 2 fingers and a thumb, have you realized what you're eating? What if it is displeasing to God? What if in there is the right of somebody else? Does it make a difference whether you eat with 2 fingers and a thumb or with the whole hand? What you're doing is essentially wrong. No matter how refined the form might be, the essence is wrong. He said, but if the food is wholesome and pleasing to God, then it's very secondary whether you eat with 2 fingers and a thumb or take the food with the whole hand and gulp it down your mouth. He said, and if you sleep, if you have hurt people, and if people's rights are upon you, what difference does it make whether you sleep on your right side or left side? But if you go to sleep at night with a light heart that you've given the rights of people to them, and your God is pleased with you, that if you were to die, He will be happy with you, then sleep on your face like the devil, it doesn't make any difference. If you're a devil and sleep on your right hand side, you're not righteous. But if you're righteous and you sleep like the devil, you're not wrong. You know, as we say, the devil sleeps on his face. He said, when you talk, if you're somebody who's saying lies and inaccurate things, what difference does it make whether you say it softly or shout it out? And if you're saying the truth, then what difference does it make if you shout and your legs are stretched out, at least what you're saying is pleasing to your God? This is what we mean. The essence has to be assured. The essence has to be there. We can't become so fixated on the forms of the things that we are doing. We need to go back on the track of evolution. If you look at the people who killed Hussein ibn Ali, Salamullah alayh, they preyed upon their dead and they buried them. They killed Hussein, but at the same time they made sure that they prayed their Dhuhr, their Asr, their Maghrib, their Isha. They prayed upon their dead and they buried them. These were the people. Now we come to the 11th of Muharram. There was a person who had lost his daughter. The 6th Imam sent a message to him. He said, if you do not find any rest in your heart at the death of your daughter, then go to her grave and place the palms of your hands upon the dust of her grave, and you will find comfort in your heart. To whose grave should Zainab turn? And we know that when Hamza had fallen and Safiya wanted to see her brother, the Prophet of Islam said, "Don't go, aunt." She insisted. The Prophet said, "Give her raisins. It will allow her to feel comfort." Ali and Ja'far go with her on right and left and place a cloth on Hamza's body. When she saw Hamza, she fainted in grief. "Safiya, your Hamza had a head to his body." The state is this, that Zainab, Kulthum, and the women are tied. Their hands are tied, maybe to their necks. Sajjad's state is this, that he has chains around his hands and a yoke upon his neck. And he's so weak that he falls off the camel, so they have tied his legs and feet from beneath the belly of the camel to hold him onto the camel. The women are being taken from the place where Hussein's torn body lies on the burning plains of Karbala. The scene is this as it is depicted. From afar, as Kulthum sees the body of Hussein, she turns towards Medina and says, "Wa Jadda, O grandfather, the angels salute you within the lofty heavens. Come to Karbala. Is this not the same Hussein who rode upon the back of your shoulder? Is he not the same one whose lips you adorned with your kisses? Come and see how he lies without a head, with the gushing blood from his jugulars giving him the ceremonial washing, and the dust of Karbala giving him the ceremonial shroud." When they come near to Hussein, Zainab falls from behind the back of the camel. Only Allah knows how she arrives upon the body of her brother, for we are told her hands are tied behind her back or in front of her. She takes Hussein into her arms and she cries out aloud. As she cries, a child comes and says, "Aunt, where is my father? This is your father." The child sleeps next to Zainab and next to her father. I can't understand and I can't think. How does a person go to a body which has no head? Do you know how painful it is to see people that we love in that coffin? How do you see a person who has been torn into bits and whose head has been snatched from its body? I don't know what this little Sakina is feeling in her heart. In any case, she cries and laments. There is a call. Prepare to leave. She hesitates to leave. We find this, that the whip is cracked upon her back. "O son of my mother, by God, your sister would never abandon you, even if the beasts of the jungle were to tear her apart, consume her flesh, and drink her blood. But, oh brother, taking care of your orphans has tired your sister. Oh brother, do you not see how the whip of Shimmer has blackened the back of your sister?" They leave, and this is the scene we find. And this is the last thing I'm narrating. The camels were driven at merciless speeds. And this is what we read. that there were still little children and babies that these women had. And at times they would fall from their arms and hands. The mothers would look on, only to see the hooves of horses and camels trample them to death. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. إلهي إنا نسألك بحق الحسين وجده وأبيه وأمه وأخيه وتسعة المعصومين من ذريته وبنيه، اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار، اللهم عجل فرج إمامنا المنتظر واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه. ماتم حسين.